Going to call this meeting of the Senate Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee to order. I'd like to start off with ask Senator Anderson if he would start us off in prayer, please. What number are you, Senator?
Number 1, but it says I'm number 9.
Well, we know you're number 1 in our hearts.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you again for once giving us another beautiful day. Dear Lord, we just thank you for all the wonderful blessings you have bestowed upon us. We ask you to forgive us of our sins. Dear Lord, we just ask you for the wisdom and knowledge we need to make the right decisions for the great people of the great state of Georgia in this ag meeting. Dear Lord, be with our families as we're away from them. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to pause once again. Thank you for loving us. In your name's sake, amen.
Thank you, Senator. All righty, we're going to start off here with Senate Bill 494. Senator Watson. A simple bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's all right. Catherine Russell with the department's going to join me up here for all the hard questions,
Absolutely.
if that's all right.
Okay.
We good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you all members of the committee. I do bring before you Senate Bill 494. This is LC 550217, better known as the Georgia Hemp Farming Act. And just to give you a little insight, this bill is on licensing and registration, and I have a visual aid here just for the committee to kind of see kind of where we are in the hemp economy. And those red arrows there are basically what we're overseeing and regulating today. So as you can tell from this picture, there's a good bit of the industry that we're not regulating at all, and that's why we're here today. So just to go ahead and jump right in it, just want to kind of run through each section real quick, and then be glad to take any questions. But as you can see in section 1, you'll notice that we've got a lot of clarifying language in here dealing with hemp grower licensees. We're actually going from 1 license to 4 licensees, so that's the purpose of a lot of the clarification that you'll see as you move throughout the bill. Section 2 is definitions. You'll see where several definitions have been added on page 2 as that starts, and page 3 as well. Hemp grower licensee, manufacturer license, registered laboratory on page 4, retail consumable hemp, wholesale consumable hemp license, and then we get into section 3. There again, just updating some language for the licensee part and who it applies to. Section 4 begins the new section of the bill. This is where we're creating the actual license to process, to sell, to handle, and to manufacture. And you'll see as you go through there all of that new language. At the end of that section, you'll notice the criminal violations in lines 164 through 169, and continuing on page 8. There's some civil penalties there of not more than $5,000 for each violation. Section 5 is relating to the procedures for licensing fees and who can obtain these licenses. I think some of this language was added by the senator from the 41st and previous hemp legislation. But all this conforms with the federal legislation as well. Section 6, we're lowering the hemp processor permit from $25,000 down to $10,000 on lines 205, and then going into and processing and manufacturing would be the same license or permit fee for either one of those procedures or processes. Section 7, again, we're just updating some language, clarifying the hemp grower licensee, That's some bonding language, as you can see through there on page 10. Section 8, again, is a new section. This is the creation of the retail license requirements. There's the fee range there you'll see is from $250 to not more than $4,000 to be established by the commissioner. And I'm assuming that would be based on volume and how much they actually sell. Moving on to Section 9 is another new section. This is the creation of the wholesale license. And their annual license fee of at least $500, but not more than $10,000 to be established by the commissioner. Section 10 is creating the manufacturer license, which sets it at $5,000 on lines 330 on page 14. Section 11 is another new section. This is on the labs. So we're creating the creation of the labs that test the hemp products. They would be required to pay a one-time registration fee of $250. Section 12, just some more cleanup, clarifying on the hemp grower licensee. Section 13 is just authorizing the department to ask for samples. And then Section 14 is just a section on enforcement and the revocation of licenses and some cleanup language to the current code section. And that kind of rounds out the bill, Mr. Chairman. Be glad to take any questions. I know there's been a lot of hemp discussions today, but I think this is a very important part of what we're doing in our state. As I mentioned earlier, for those that came in late, this is the current structure of our hemp economy, and the two red arrows are what we're regulating in our state today. And that's all we're regulating, and that's all we're making sure that consumers are being protected. It's one of the reasons we wanted to bring this bill to this committee. It is about consumer protection and making sure what's in these products is what's in these products, and that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So just appreciate the committee's willingness to hear this bill and be glad to take any questions.
All right, looks like we have a question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Watson, Chairman, Senator Watson. Just wanted to go back to this wide range that the commissioner, who I know is present today, in terms of licensure fees. Can you speak to why the fee can be between $500 and $10,000? It just seems like a mighty wide range. I'm seeing some smiles
Yeah,
here.
I don't know if Catherine wants to touch on that, but I think the department is definitely open to whatever this body thinks is appropriate, or the community, but I'll let her speak to that.
Certainly. Thank you. Catherine Russell from the Department of Agriculture. So you're 100% correct. We have some pretty wide ranges. We put in numbers that we thought made sense, but we're certainly open to whatever is the pleasure of the committee. My thoughts with the wholesale establishment license is that you could have someone who technically falls under a wholesaler but is moving very small amounts of volume, right? So they would need a much lower fee, but I can also imagine a scenario where you have an enormous wholesaler moving a tremendous amount of product. And in such instances, I think that a really high fine or, licensure fee is appropriate. And we haven't laid it out in code because we intend to do it in rules and regulations. It's not uncommon for the department to establish tiers based on volume for movement of different products, and that would be established by what seems to be the most applicable for kind of different areas or different types of volume that's being moved from a different one wholesaler to another. It's long-winded. I apologize.
No, it's okay. May I follow up? So I guess this would be done annually. So, I mean, let's say a person initially says, well, I'm only going to sell a small amount. And so they get the $500 tier, and business booms, and then suddenly they discover it's a product that they can really move. That first year, they just kind of get a buy, and then the next year we would perhaps bump them up to a higher tier. Is that the thought process here?
Yes, they would be very fortunate that first year. And the years following, they would have a more appropriate licensure fee.
Got it. Thank you.
All righty, we have 6. Senator Hatchett.
The hemp products that I guess are referred to at least in line 152, does that include like the material that people make, like the fabric hemp?
Yes.
So hemp products would also be the fabric, and then we're licensing people.
In this instance, it would. Manufacturing specifically has a carve-out. All of the other licenses that we're discussing are specific to consumable hemp products, but not the manufacturing one.
And then I guess the products that people sell, they would be allowed to sell in the state of Georgia. Let me
Okay.
just get to where I'm getting. If you look at line 139, it says it shall be unlawful for any person, and you go to line 139, to possess hemp in this state unless such person holds a processing permit issued by the department or is employed by a permittee. So if you sell the hemp, you're obviously going to sell it to somebody who doesn't hold a permit or isn't employed by you. Are we making it essentially a crime for anyone to possess any type of hemp?
Yeah.
Because I think hemp, if you go back over to the definitions of what hemp is, and it talks about a derivative of the plant, and it has a THC level that is federally defined or less than. So I think even if it's zero THC, I'm just making sure we're not going too far with that line 139 and 140.
Okay, I apologize. It may just take me a second to catch up with you here. So 139 says to process hemp in the state.
You know what? I'm sorry. I thought it said possess.
Okay.
And it says
right.
process.
So-
I read it too quickly.
And when you said it, I read it the same way. I was like, oh.
All right. Excuse me. Ignore those questions. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Uh,
I read it too fast.
You're good, my friend. Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so if you're gonna sell it at the retail level, you're gonna have to have a license of $250 to $250 to $4,000.
Right.
And this is stuff like, I guess it says, Delta 8, Delta 9.
Well, the
Oh.
bill doesn't speak specifically to different cannabinoids. It speaks only to hemp products. Does that make sense?
So what if you sell a hemp-infused beer, which I think there is such a thing, believe it or not.
Yeah, I've heard about these. So you would need a retailer's license to do such.
Okay. Do we have any idea how many retailers this might impact?
We don't have any idea.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason we need the licensure program, so that we are able to keep a list of who all is involved in the hemp economy, where a product is moving, and that'll help us to kind of tighten down on some of the illegal processes.
So are we trying to get it like Delta 8, Delta 9 gummies, THC gummies, or what are we, I mean, I know you're saying hemp, but
So with this bill, we're only creating licenses for the establishments, for the wholesalers, for the manufacturers, so that the department has a full idea of who is engaged in and involved in the hemp economy. And then it also gives us some recourse if there are bad actors.
Do convenience stores customarily or commonly sell hemp products?
They do, as far many, and they would need.
And give me an example of what would be.
Well, so I did some shopping actually over over the interim, and I bought an assortment of hemp products and from a number of places. And actually, one of my coworkers went in one morning and he bought a cup of coffee and a THCA joint at 7 o'clock in the morning from the gas station. And so that gas station would be required to have.
So it
a
is the
retail-
THC type products. Can I continue, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I'm not trying to like cross-examine you. I'm just trying to get a idea. So we got 250 to 4,000, which is a pretty wide range, and then we have so the convenience store buys these from a wholesaler probably, and that's 500 to 10,000. But then you go to the processor, which seems like further up the chain to me, and that's just, is that 10,000? Okay, and then you have manufacturer, and I don't know how you manufacture hemp. It seems like you grow it.
Well, we have a new definition for that in this bill, and the intent there is to capture. There are people who are manufacturing hemp products, consumable hemp products, much like you would manufacture food, but they aren't actually doing the processing. So they aren't taking the plant and then distilling it. They aren't creating a distillate after that point. In fact, what they're doing is they're buying distillate and they're like spray applying it to whatever it is that they're going to sell. So they aren't processors. They're just manufacturing the consumables.
And then that one I think was 5,000, a fixed amount. Is that right?
It is, unless you already have a processor permit, because those two things are so intertwined.
It just seems odd to me that you could actually have a retailer paying 4,000 and a wholesaler paying 500, and then a processor paying 10, and then a manufacturer paying 5. There doesn't seem, to me, there's not really any logic to that.
I think
That
the
fee
logic is that
structure.
they would be tiered based on volume. And so you may have a wholesaler who only moves, let's say, 10 products a year. It's a much smaller amount. And then you may have retailers and that are somewhere else on the spectrum. But that's the logic behind it.
Senator
One
Walker,
more.
if you don't mind, I've got two other senators been blinking for a while.
Okay.
I'll come back to you though. Senator Estevez, you've got your light's been. Go ahead.
You know what? I'll pass for now.
Okay, Senator Anderson.
Thank you. Do we have all these fees you're talking about? Do we have them fees already in place in other products that we have to? And what I'm getting at, give us some examples if we already have these fees in place of any kind of other product that the Ag Commissioner has to
So
regulate.
I may have to step away and get my laptop to pull
Yeah.
up the code section.
Okay.
But it is a similar process that's already existing. I can do that now, or maybe I could do it while there are other speakers and get back to you to provide an
Would that be okay
example.
with you, Senator?
Whichever
Yeah.
you prefer.
That'd be fun.
Okay.
And I just also wanted to make the statement. I think in terms of the variance in volume, I know if you're, take for instance, the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, the difference between what you pay, the lowest amount's $250 versus if you're selling $10 million a year, you may be paying, Senator Watson, what is it, the top amount? It's just depending on how much business you do. I think that's why there's a variance in it.
Could it
be Yeah.
uniform? You wouldn't just randomly.
Right.
So there'd be tiers. There'd be 4
Yeah.
tiers. I'm sorry, I thought I said that earlier. There'll be 4 tiers within each category, so that it is set. It's not variable based on when someone shows up with an application.
Yeah, and right now, we don't know how much any of them are selling, whether it's a small amount or a large amount versus the type of business structure that they're in.
And if we are not dedicated to these fees, we are 100% open to seeing whatever adjustments the committee thinks is appropriate.
Any more questions from members of the committee?
I want to hear what you got to say.
Okay, I'm sorry, we've got 2 more lights lighting up here. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to make sure I follow this process. So let's just take a bud of hemp. So that's where we're starting with, right? So a grower gets a license to grow it. How much do you pay to get the license?
It can vary by acreage, and there's a cap, I think.
Because that's not actually in this bill, I don't think.
It's not.
We're not changing that.
But it's based on acreage, and then there's a cap.
Okay.
I think it's maybe 50.
Let's just say the grower. Let's just say that it's inconsequential how much the growing license is, but that bud. But we'll say it's $50 for that one bud to grow, for the grower to grow it, and then the processor is going to pay $10,000 for that bud in order to process it. Am I correct so far? Yes, and then
yes,
I mean
wouldn't
I am, and then the
quite describe
processor then takes it to essentially a wholesaler who also could pay up to $10,000 for that bud in order to wholesale it, and then the retailer could pay up to $4,000 for that same bud in order to sell it to the consumer.
Could I interject for just a minute? I understand what you're saying, but that's like saying me, I sell 2 million pounds of blueberries a year, and that's like putting the entire cost of my food safety program on one blueberry. You get what I'm saying?
I do understand
Okay.
that.
Go ahead.
And I mean, so if we do my math, my one bud cost us $20,000 or $24,050. And that just seems like we're feeing people to death.
Oh, I think if we were selling one bud for that amount, yes, we would be.
Right. I'm just concerned about. I'm concerned about all of the fees that are associated with this.
What did you sell
over
the
and
one
over
bud
again.
for?
Well, we can't extricate it out. I mean, so maybe I think it would be helpful to me as a committee member to be reminded of all of the costs to the state that it is to run and to regulate a hemp program, so that I can understand a bit better where this $24,000 for my bud is coming from.
Well, estimates that I made this morning for implementation of this, plus like if we were to have the enforcement powers to go pull product and test, would be a little bit over 500,000. So we've got people in place that are already working toward these goals, and we would just need to add a little bit more with that, and that would also include a software build out so that we could keep up with all the licenses and all the locations, and I think the main concern that we really have about the reason we want to register these products is because there's so much here that's dangerous. And because there are no regulations, it is a wild market, and people are making incredible amounts of money with no concern for the consuming public.
All righty, we got Senator Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to remember what we've done on this committee and how all this relates. I think it's related to Chairman Walker's questions, because I remember there was a very similar line of questioning last session, and I think it was related to CBD legislation. Mm-hmm. That passed out of this committee. Mm-hmm. What happened with that legislation?
That legislation was, all this bill is doing is creating the licensing part of it. That's what this bill is doing. So, and what they're trying to do, and I have met with our friends in the Department of Agriculture, what they're trying to do, and I came up this past, I can't remember when it was, but we had a meeting in the Ag Department. I know Senator Robertson was there, and some of the things that are being sold, you could go to a gas station within 2 miles from here and find marijuana with 24.5% THC.
I
And so,
have some.
you have some. You may want to. And so what? Yeah. And so anything above 0.3% is considered to be marijuana, right? And so, in order to know some of these folks that are doing, and some of this stuff too, I think there'll be further legislation to try to do something about it. But when you see some of this stuff these people are selling, that looks like Skittles, and it's THC Skittles is what it is. But and so, but until they can get a handle on who all's selling this stuff, they can't address it, and that's the reason for the licensing of these.
Which I agree completely, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to see how all of this plays together, and if they're separate things, then I think that's what I'm asking. Is this part of continuing the work that we did last year? Is this in replacing what we did last year? How does all this interplay with each other?
I think that you might be referencing, I believe it was House Bill 437 that came through. I think it was Representative Perkle's bill, and it had some of the same components in it that we have here. And what I tried to do during the interim is look at what happened with that bill, how we managed to throw out the really good and trying to get the perfect. And so this, I think that may be what you're remembering, because it is very similar. But this is so what we tried to do is separate it and isolate it so that we don't inadvertently get the relatively straightforward things held up because of the more controversial subjects.
Okay. Because in the bills that we passed last year, there were a lot of fees, and there were questions from the committee, and there were some changes that were made that satisfied folks on the committee. I'm just thinking, if we're talking about similar things, maybe we should make sure we're aligning all these different fees with, since it's the same subject matter.
Right, and
Those didn't pass last year.
At all. So this is an attempt to go back and do that.
Address the same, yeah.
Again.
The same problem is still there.
Okay, well, then my point still remains, which is, I think that there were some changes to address Senator Walker's, and I think Senator Jackson's points, and maybe we just need to make sure that
Completely
we
open to
follow
that.
that. Yeah.
all righty. We're coming back to Senator Walker. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, oftentimes when we talk about these products that we see all over the place, we talk about them, they're unregulated, you don't know what's in them. Oftentimes, part of the statement is they're coming in from China. I hear that a lot. How are we going to tax manufacturers and processors in China?
Well, that's an admirable goal that we did not address in this bill.
So it's just if it's a Georgia manufacturer or processor.
If anything, it's the Department of Agriculture isn't set up to be able to patrol the internet. We just don't have that far reach. We can control what's being sold in the state, and it may be that what we need to do is step out a little bit further. Actually, we might actually address that. Not that we can control it, but if we say that you can't sell it in this state without a license, then we would have, let me just see if I can pull that real quick. Here it is. Line 145. It is unlawful to sell or offer for sale any consumable hemp product in the state to consumers unless such person holds a retail consumable hemp establishment license issued by the department or is employed by a person who holds such a license. So we're essentially making it illegal for them to sell it within the state here. Now, I don't know that we can, put people on a plane to go collect in China, but we've at least closed the loophole for selling here.
One last question, Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me. All right, using the chairman's example of the Skittles with 25% THC or whatever it was,
Yeah.
is that a legal product currently under?
No. It is currently illegal.
So why is there not enforcement of current laws it seems like we're now trying to license an illegal product almost in the means of trying to then enforce I don't know, just
So,
I think we ought to enforce it. If it's illegal, there ought to be consequences currently.
So,
And if I could interject,
Sure.
Ms. Russell, you may want to discuss that. You have other legislation that's moving throughout this building to address some of these things, but there again, this is simply for the licensing part of it. They do have other legislation that's being carried. I believe Senator Robertson's carrying a bill to address some of this as well. But go ahead, please.
I was going to say that we actually have requests to assist some local law enforcement when they have these type issues come up, and we are ready and available and very much interested in fulfilling that enforcement role, and we do have a piece of legislation that addresses that, and Senator Robertson's carrying it.
Okay. We're lighting up all over the place here. I believe that's Senator Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just clarification, I appreciate the discussion about enforcement. And does the department or do local law enforcement agencies have the ability to enforce current law? And they seek your assistance in determining whether or not it's legal or illegal, is that correct?
There are a bunch of questions in there.
Yeah, there are.
There are. We can just parse them out.
We'll start with, does the department or local law enforcement have the ability or the authority to enforce current Georgia law?
Currently, the locals do.
Locals. But they don't have the expertise to determine whether or not it's a legal or illegal product. Is that true?
So, I certainly would not want to speak of what any law enforcement may or may not have expertise in. I can tell you that they've come to us with questions because we have made it an important part of how the department operates to address some of these concerns. And so we have shared information that we've gathered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Follow
And I will
up.
say this. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hopefully, Senator Robertson's bill will address this concern a bit. And, I would like to see enforcement and with confiscation of illegal products, that's just like we would any other illegal product, any other illegal drug, confiscation and destruction, and then penalties associated with marketing those products. That'll take care of whether China does it or it's grown in South Georgia somewhere around, Senator Watson's farm. I don't know.
And so this legislation is all about creating the list, and it's not just it's like when Congress passed the Food Modernization Act, all of us that own packing sheds had to register with the FDA, and so you have to. This is about creating the list so that we know who is selling this stuff, and if they're not licensed, then they're selling it illegally. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the department's attention to moderating based on the fees, based on how much you're selling or how much you're selling. I wonder if the department would be open to doing the same thing for processing. I recall hours and hours of testimony. think we only have a few processors. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm thinking about people who do maybe some smaller batches, if they might be able to process without having to pay $10,000. If we could do some moderated fees there, we could perhaps get some smaller processors online to help expedite our processing practices.
We are open to adjustments of fees.
Good, thank you.
All righty. Senator Estevez.
Last thing, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what the department's trying to do here. There is a concern around if Georgia growers are going to have to pay money and follow these rules,
So,
get a license.
so currently they have to, and what really works, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, go ahead.
What currently really works against our farmers is that they are following the rules. And much of the product that's being sold is coming from places where they don't have those regulations. So it's not nearly as expensive for them. Oftentimes their product has pesticides and other things that are that you wouldn't want anyone to consume. And these plants are particularly prone to absorbing what's in the ground around them. So more so than you would find with like corn or something else. And so they're far more likely to test hot.
And I'd like to interject, and Senator, what you just perfectly explained is what we Georgia farmers have been fighting for years and years, because we're under the same thing with the people we're having to compete with. And that's, you just articulated it only on hemp. But Senator Anderson.
Are we able to regulate right now, if I understand it right, Senator Watson, are we being able to, the Department of Ag being able to watch over and make sure that nothing exceeds over the 3% dry matter on the THC?
Are we able to regulate it?
Well, no, you say right now, the grower, what your green sheet says?
So right now, yeah, we're regulating the grower, the farmer, and
Yeah.
the
Are we
processor.
being able to keep up with the farmer to make sure that they don't have nothing over 3%? Okay. All right.
All right, Senator Hatchett.
So I think I understand this a little bit better now, and I think this is going to be a good bill for Georgians and Georgia farmers, because if I'm not mistaken, if you start at line 145, what this says is you can't offer to sell to any consumer unless you hold a retail license. You can't offer to sell to any retailer unless that person holds a wholesale license. So if I'm selling Skittles from China and I bring them to Georgia, well, I can't sell them to consumers, I can't sell them to retailers, I can't sell them to manufacturers unless I have a license. So this is going to protect Georgia farmers and the farmers, and it's going to make it to where only Georgia-grown hemp can be sold in the state of Georgia legally. Right?
I think that we could probably have products from states that comply with our regulations.
If they're licensed.
If those things come in and they're licensed appropriately. And to Chairman Walker's question earlier, I actually just thought of something. It's not included in this bill, but in our bill that addresses enforcement, if we take a product that's hot or that has too much arsenic or whatever the case may be, we'll be able to take all of the product in the store, which is a severe disincentive for any retailer to continue to have that product in their store.
Okay. Are there any more questions from members of the committee? Okay, we have, it is already 45 minutes into this and we have another bill to hear. Mr. Leader, I'm sorry I waited on you. I tried to let you be first, but,
Chairman Calvert's fault.
yes, sir. We have, 6 people lined up to speak. We'll allow 2 minutes apiece. The first person J.D. McCormick. Go ahead and time him. J.D. McCormick here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is J.D. McCormick, and I'm the president of the American Healthy Alternatives Association. We have worked on hemp legislation across the country and worked diligently with surrounding state legislatures, including Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, North and South Carolina, to help pass common sense hemp regulations. We support the sentiments in Senate Bill 494 and hope to work with the bill sponsors as it moves through the process on tweaking just a few of the definitional changes and some of the licensing fees, but we support its moving forward today to keep things on track during a short legislative session. Common sense regulations helps to invite capital investment and creates market stability for operators. The leadership of the Agriculture Commissioner on this issue has been fantastic, and we hope to continue to work with him to pass good legislation and eventually as the industry's regulator. This bill is a great first step in striking a balance between consumer protection and industry viability. Thank you, Senator Watson, for bringing forward this good bill.
Thank you for the brevity. The next speaker is Leva. If I could ask you to please, when you testify, make your remarks about the bill, please.
I'll keep it real short because I'd love to speak on 525 also. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the misdemeanor off, the restriction. I think that's really good. And I am very happy that the Department of Agriculture will be getting more money for this program because I think there's a lot of work to do with the cannabis seed bank and just there's so much we can develop. And so I really like the idea of there being a lot of licenses, and it's something I actually asked for in exchange for lowering the processing fee, which I think is very restrictive. I think I would love it to be lower as well. And when I researched other states, something that I found to be really amazing was the Florida bill, which is where I saw that they were licensing distributors and wholesalers and retailers, but they all had the same fee. Even the processor, it was all $6.50. And so I asked the director of cannabis, why? And she said, well, it's because we just charge per facility. Because we inspect the facility because we want it to be as clean as if you were eating there. So we have those standards. And so if there's a processing facility, if they have two different facilities, then there's a different charge or license for each facility. So I just wanted to add that information if you wanted to chew on it.
Thank you for your remarks. Chuck McMullen. And the following speaker will be Dr. Yolanda Henderson.
Oh, she couldn't make it. I mean, she had to go. She said she thanks you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of my firm, MCA Group, and we represent Georgia-based retailers and wholesalers. We support this bill. We also support the entire package that the Department of Agriculture has put forward. We support in its effort to regulate hemp products. And we thank Senator Watson for his leadership on this issue. And again, I want to reiterate that Georgia-based retailers and wholesalers do support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I represent Georgia Hemp Alliance. We mainly retail stores, but we have some growers and a processor as well. I've been working on hemp since 2010. Farm Bill started in D.C. and 14 years now. The Georgia law has started out bad. There was a second bill that fixed some of the stuff. I want to address quickly a couple of the questions came up here. We very much support this bill. The department has done a beautiful job with it. Most of this in the two bills that have been introduced are in House Bill 196, which was a combined medical cannabis, and all the hemp bills that got introduced last year were put together. It didn't flow very well. It wasn't perfect. The language here is much better, but it covers the same issues by and large. The only negative comment I would say deals with the fees. I think initially we had 6 processors, and I think we're down to 1 now, and they're struggling. we have to get products from out of state because we do not have a thriving processing business or industry in Georgia. Looking around us, the last time I checked, Tennessee does not charge a processing fee. Alabama has a $1,000 processing fee, and South Carolina had a $3,000 processing fee. The high license fees are really hindering the operation of the processors by and large. We very much support the registration of retail sales outlet. One of the reasons that we can't enforce this now is because the department doesn't know where the products are being sold. You have standalone CBD stores, you have convenience stores, but there's really no list of where the locations are. So there's really no way for anybody to really enforce it. And the other big problem I see is with the bond. It deals with the processor primarily. The bonds are difficult, if not impossible, to obtain. I think there was one processor here earlier in another meeting for Senate Bill 437. I don't know if he's here now, but Russ Bryant with Second Century down in Osceola has first-hand knowledge about how that's hindering and how difficult it is to get that bond. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. West. Sarah Nichols.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Sarah Nichols. I own SJ Labs and Analytics. We are a third-party cannabis testing facility in the state of Georgia. We serve the hemp industry, the Georgia medical cannabis industry, and we work with law enforcement for testing cannabis and illicit substances. I really want to reiterate to this committee that anybody in Georgia who touches cannabis is in favor of this bill. And I mean that to say the sheriff's associations, the chief of police, the district attorneys, hemp farmers, hemp processors, hemp manufacturers, and there is a distinct difference, and compliance labs and advocates. People who tell you otherwise are out-of-state operators who are profiting off of selling illicit products in Georgia and calling them compliant. And the reason they can do it, as many people have mentioned, is because the Department of Agriculture does not have the enforcement capability or the oversight of retail shops. We don't know who they are, and we have a difficult time. There's no way to regulate it. This bill, I want to kind of give some insight on the hemp economy. There's a lot of questions here about what the fees would be. And a processor in Georgia, I don't think there is a processor in Georgia who would qualify for a $10,000 fee because the market's not there. And I don't think Tennessee is your model to go after either because they're in a worse position than Georgia is. It's important that you have a fee, and I understand that looking at it at first sight, it does look high. But there isn't an industry right now for that fee for them to ever get to $10,000. 5 years from now, there may be. And we need that money there to support a regulated program. And a manufacturer is making topicals out of oil that they're purchasing. Their risk is a lot lower than a processor who has ethanol that they are running through and heating up. There's different risk factors for entering the market, and those barriers of entry are reflected in these costs as well, not just from an economic standpoint, but from a risk perspective of barriers to entry. I think that, honestly, I think $10,000 is a fair structure for processors, and I do agree with stepping it down in levels, like the 4 levels like the other ones were doing. I don't think that Second Century would meet the processor or the manufacturer top tier level right now. They would be at a lower level. But there are retail shops like your masseuse who maybe sells to their clients a couple CBD products. They should not pay more than $250 a year. That being said, there are massive shops in Atlanta. I know the store down from me in Macon is making $350,000 a month. They can afford a $10,000 license. So perspective on that economy, retail shops are thriving, the farmer is dying.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. I'm sorry, all right, thank you for your testimony. I know it's hard to get everything in, but we could try not to have a 3-hour committee hearing. So I believe What is the will of the committee? All righty. Okay. We have a motion from Dupass from Senator Hatchett and a second from Senator Jackson. You can second as well. All right. All in favor? Is there any further discussion? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose an amendment to this bill. Beginning on line 204. It's really line 205. It's line 205. An annual permit fee. I'd like to do a range of between $500 to $10,000,
Okay.
so that we can have a tiered processing system. So it would be an annual permit fee of at least $500, but no more than $10,000.
Okay.
It's here already, annual. Yes, ma'am. So line two, so just so I'm clear,
All
line
right, guys.
205.
Hey, may I ask everybody in the audience, please hold it down? Okay, go ahead, Senator.
So line 205, we would strike, we would keep of and then add at least $500, but no more than, and then 10,000's already there.
Okay.
What do you say? Yes, as established by the commissioner. Sorry, I need to keep that whole line, as established by the commissioner.
Okay.
So I would move that we would make that amendment.
We're gonna need to make a vote on the underlying bill first, so,
No.
am I wrong about that? Okay, I thought we had to pass the underlying bill and then amend it. Okay, so we have a motion, all right. You'd like a second, okay, sorry, y'all, I'm still learning how to be a chairman, so,
You're doing great.
yeah, I'm doing the best I can with what little bit the good Lord gave me. Yes, all right, so everyone in any further discussion on that? Okay, Senator Burns.
I just want to just clarify, the department would determine the levels, is that right? It could go from 500 to 10,000, and you're not going to tell them how many levels. There's 9,500 levels in the middle, perhaps, but that's not likely. I'm just saying.
Did you write down what it
That's
says?
Yes, sir.
Department's comfortable. Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
It's been
everyone
moved
in,
and seconded.
everyone in favor of the amendment? Okay, it's unanimous.
I have one more amendment, if you would, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
On line 230, this is related to the bonding. I would like to amend it to strike the minimum amount of such bond shall be 300,000 and. So instead, it would read, however, that the maximum amount shall be 1 million, and therefore we'd leave it to the commissioner. We already have rules established above about how the commissioner might determine it.
okay, read that one more time.
So line 230, I would like to strike the minimum amount of such bond shall be $300,000 and. 230, line 230.
Line 230. Mr. Commissioner, you good with that? Okay, you have that, and then we're gonna strike that out. Okay. We have a second. All in favor of? Well, is there any further discussion? Yeah, okay, wait, we got,
I'm uncomfortable with no floor. Give me a floor.
Well, if you will look at line 228, there is a floor already established. So start at line 227. The bond shall be in such amount as the commissioner may determine, not exceeding an amount equal to 2% of the amount of hemp purchased from the hemp grower licensed by the permittee in the most recent calendar year. So there are some parameters already there.
So we don't know what the minimum is, but there is a 2% minimum based upon prior year's sales. Is that right?
That's correct. And the commissioner would maintain authority to determine the amounts. He
Thank
felt,
you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, anything we would do would be done through rule and reg.
You want to come, Mr. Commissioner, you want to come up here where you can be recorded for posterity? It is.
So, on the bond, on any of the fee structure, and if we need to have further discussion about what those tiers should be, we are open to having that conversation. I will say, though, any of that would have to be done through rule and reg, which is a public process through the Department of Agriculture, correct? And so those would be established in our rules and regs, which would be laid out through a public process, which requires a public hearing, which requires public input. No different than the process we have here. It's just done through an administrative process versus a legislative process. And so those fee structures would be determined that way. That said, I was just informed by our attorney on the fee structure on the bond. If there's room for conversation on what that looks like, there may be concern about whether or not a surety may be willing to be involved if it's set too low. And so if we leave it open-ended at such a lower amount, that it may cause a concern for us being able to have a surety that would be willing to do that. So there probably does need to be a floor of some sort. We'll leave that. That's a legislative decision, right? But okay. But we could obviously huddle and be willing to provide some feedback on what that.
I'm going to
should
interject
be.
just for a minute, Mr. Commissioner. What would be a bottom number that you think y'all would be comfortable with?
Can I?
Yes, please.
Can I get with my attorney?
May I just make a suggestion?
Sure, go ahead,
Would
Senator.
you consider $50,000 as a bond?
I think that would be a reasonable
Bond amount?
starting point, Mr. Chairman. And if we can follow back up, we would be willing to do that.
Okay. Okay, good deal. Senator Walker.
So my understanding, Commissioner, is the bond is to protect the grower.
The bond is to protect the grower.
So you don't want a buyer to abscond with his crop
That's
and not
correct.
pay him.
It's no different than the bond law we have in many other
And
commodities.
Mr. Dunn testified that it's a real barrier to entry and that you can't hardly find anybody to write a bond for this. I'd be okay with eliminating the bond requirement altogether, or just setting a $100,000 bond amount, 300. I mean, if that's preventing Georgia processing and Georgia this industry to
Yes, sir.
get off the ground, this is just protecting the grower from fraud.
That's correct.
It doesn't have anything to do with the safety of the public or the purity of the product on the shelf. There are other ways for a grower to ensure payment. I mean, they could require a irrevocable letter of credit from a bank, or I'm not a farmer, but we don't require bonds for the corn grower selling to. Well, maybe we do.
Yeah, there is a grain dealer bond, yes, sir.
But if this, I just wonder how big a barrier this really is to this really nascent type industry.
Understood. I think to your point, Mr. Chairman, I think when we originally wrote the bill years ago, considering that it was an agricultural commodity and considering that we have bond laws in relation to those ag commodities, I think that was the thought process, was making it similar to how we've addressed other commodities, correct? However, this is a legislative decision, and at the department, we're open to having that conversation on how we can best address it to ensure that this industry can thrive in our state. Because right now, as has been pointed out in this committee hearing today, I think you've heard, it's been hampered significantly, and at the department, we're committed to ensuring our hemp industry in our state can be successful. So anything that we see or perceive as those barriers, we're willing to find ways to help address those. And if that's part of that conversation, Mr. Chairman, we're more than willing to work with you and Senator Jackson and others to help to fix that and address that in the best way possible. If that's amending this in the committee today to whatever is the will of the committee to get us to that point, and then working on language moving forward. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you have another committee meeting scheduled between now and whenever
We'll probably have one
you're
Thursday.
required to get legislation out, but we're willing to work with y'all to get it to where the committee's comfortable. I think what I've heard and listening today, I think everybody understands the issue we're trying to address. And I think you see that industry is supportive of us addressing those issues as an agency, but we also want to ensure we're doing it in the most effective, most efficient way possible.
And I wanted to ask a question, Mr. Commissioner. Isn't it true that anyone, say the co-op that I'm a member of, we have to have a license with the Department of Agriculture to be able to sell our blueberries? Is
That's
that not
correct.
Okay, are we required to have a bond?
I would have to follow up with my attorney on that.
Our co-op, is it required to have a bond? I should know the answer to that myself, but
Can we follow up with you on
We
that?
can, we can.
Because the bond law it doesn't apply to everything, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So let me follow up with them, and I'll follow up with you on that answer, if that's okay.
that sounds good.
So it's pretty vast, but at the same time, it doesn't apply to every commodity sold in the state.
All right, good deal. All right, okay, go ahead, Senator Jackson.
All right, so I'm going to move that we amend line 230 to say, by striking $300,000 and replacing it with $50,000. It's the only change I'm making.
Okay. And so if we move forward on that amendment today, and we find out later that the commissioner and his folks have reached out to the bond companies, that we need to amend this on the floor, because it can't, I would hope that we could have some support with that from our committee. Okay. All righty. So we have a motion. Help me out here, Rachel. We had a motion to. Yeah.
I believe we had an amendment on the floor. I asked the senator to withdraw that amendment and propose the move.
Yes.
Okay. I think she did withdraw the amendment.
I respectfully request the chairman's permission to withdraw my original amendment that established no floor.
I thought you did that.
Thank you, Mr.
a minute ago.
Chairman.
But yes, go ahead.
And now, if we would please consider my motion to amend 300,000 to 50,000.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Did you want to speak? Okay.
I just want to say, in the spirit of working with the Ag Commissioner, obviously this line that we're amending was already codified. That's not part of the new bill. I think if we're going to go back and look at this, and we have the commitment from the committee, I don't really see a need to amend this right now. I mean, there's a reason why this number was set, and I just don't think it's responsible to do it on the fly without getting the background. So I would propose, I mean, I'm no offense to the senator, I would just like to move, I'm going to speak against the amendment. I'm not going to support this particular amendment, but would also say I will be in favor of changing it at a later date if we find out information that justifies it.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Good Lord. You got to love hemp bills, don't you? So you've proposed two amendments. We voted on the first one, right? Okay. The second amendment. Any further discussion on the second amendment that you propose? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hands. All those against? All righty. You got it recorded, Rachel? All right, now we have a vote on the underlining bill as amended. Make a motion to pass. Second? Huh? Do what? All right, now on the passage as amended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Y'all help me keep it. Has amended, right, has amended by committee. Let me tell y'all something. I love hemp legislation. Good Lord. Well, listen, golly, well, thank y'all for coming. We had another bill. We'll probably have another meeting Thursday to hear a bill from the majority leader. Thank y'all for all your input, and thanks for helping us get it passed.